Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, which aims to delve into the rise and development of artificial intelligence, discussing its impact in the fight against corruption. So firstly, I would like to inform you that this session will be recorded and it will be posted on our website in the days following the webinar. Throughout the session, there will be a Mentimeter quiz, which you can take either on the screen through Microsoft Teams or by following the link that we will post in the chat. There are already some questions available for you to answer now. So those who attend the full session will be sent a quiz to undertake afterwards, which will be sent to you by email, and if passed, a certificate of attendance will be issued. You may also use the Q&A section to ask questions, and they will be answered at the end of the session. So firstly, I would like to give a warm welcome to the session, Dr. Slagiana Tezeva, who is our Dean and Executive Secretary of IACA. She will give her welcoming remarks to today's webinar. Professor Slagiana Tezeva is a former committee member of the Afghanistan International Anti-Corruption Monitoring and Evaluation Committee, the first president of the Macedonian Anti-Corruption Commission, and the establisher and chair of Transparency International Macedonia. Professor Tezeva was elected the first chair of the UNCAC coalition in 2009 and headed Transparency International in North Macedonia before she joined IACA. Dear Dean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. And it is really great excitement for me. I'm really excited, and especially reading these questions to respond that yes, I have worked in the anti-corruption prevention, but I've never used the artificial intelligence tools. So I really think it is very useful, and I would like to welcome all our participants and especially our professors or panelists here who will be sharing their experience and their knowledge in this field, which is rising in importance. How to use artificial intelligence, or should we use it, and what will be the ethical way, and where is it the most useful? And I would say, most of all, how is it changing the anti-corruption work, whether it is rewriting the fight against corruption, and as it is in our title today. I was thinking, when I was thinking about this opening, I went back to the time when I was working as a main analyst on corruption, money laundering, and organized crime in my ministry. And we were very excited at that time to get the I2 tool from UK. It was on CD, and it was a tool where we really had to put everything, all the notes in a notepad, and then it was giving us chart. And that was the most advanced thing that we had at that time. That was the time when the computers were only used in the very specific departments in the institutions. But today, here we are talking about the digitalization and everything that has happened. Most of the countries are really paying attention to digitalize their processes. But all the data that I inserted there can definitely be used for policy making and for strategic planning, and but also for the different type of investigations. But myself, I'm completely beginner in using of the artificial intelligence, and I will be also doing my best to follow all these a panel and webinar today, and wishing you all to have a great discussion, and we will see the results at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for Umut, and also for Mikhail, and our colleague Mikhaili, for joining us today. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. So before we continue with today's discussion, I'll give a very brief overview of IACA and our academic programs. So the International Anti-Corruption Academy is an international organization and institution of post-secondary education which conducts research and runs master programs. IACA has 81 parties consisting of 77 state parties and 4 international organisations. We have around 6,000 alumni from over 168 countries across the world, and we have a strong alumni network. So our work consists of 3 important pillars, which are education, training and technical assistance, and research. So in particular, IACA's Academic Programs Department offers 3 master programs and 1 certificate program, which are the Master in Anti-Corruption Studies, the International Master in Anti-Corruption Compliance and Collective Action, the Master in Anti-Corruption and Compliance program in the Spanish language, and the Anti-Corruption Collective Action Certificate. So all of these programs that I've mentioned can be attended whilst continuing a professional employment engagement, and they are run with busy professionals in mind. So these courses provide essential aspects in the anti-corruption field in various elements through using multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary methods. So our applications are still open for the 2025 cohorts. So if you're interested, please follow the link in the chat box. Next, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Pawan Kumar Sinha, who is the Director of IACA's Academic Programs Department and will be moderating this webinar. In addition to his role at IACA, he's had a career in the civil services in India spanning almost 3 decades and has held several senior positions. He specializes in and teaches courses on asset recovery, corruption in customs, collective action, economics of corruption, and the role of technology in corruption. Pawan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the participants who are from all parts of the world and all my fellow panelists. It has been my pleasure that I am here today moderating this event. I recall that I started, IACA started the course on artificial intelligence, blockchain, and data analytics in 2020, introduced in our master's program. And since then, so much, the AI part has really changed the world, I would say. So it's my privilege to be moderating this discussion now. Before we start, let me introduce our panelists, starting with Professor Mikhail Ryder-Gordon. She is Managing Director of Institutional Ethics and Integrity and Chief Privacy Officer at Affiliated Monitors. She serves as an independent integrity monitor on a wide range of matters to public agencies and corporate entities under court orders and regulatory settlements. She is a fellow with For Humanity, a global nonprofit focused on addressing the downside risks of algorithmic, autonomous, and artificial intelligence system through the drafting of audit criteria for adoption of national regulatory bodies. She serves as on the organizations like LLM, LMM, and Digital Worker Audit Drafting Committee, and represents the organization on US NIST AI Safety Institute Consortium Working Group. Professor Gordon is on the faculty of University of Surrey School of Law, where she devotes her research into artificial intelligence regulations within the international legal framework. She also serves as the University of Surrey's Ethics Review Panel, and she serves on UK's British Standard Institute Committee and a member of Association of AI Ethicists. So a warm welcome, Mikhail, on this panel. Then Dr. Umut Turksen is a professor in law at University of Exeter. He is a business-facing legal scholar who has provided consultancy and training to prestigious international businesses and government projects on societal security, countering financial crime and terrorist financing, and AI governance. He led the EU-funded project ProTax, which focused on countering tax crimes and corruption in Europe. And he has recently coordinated the EU-funded project named TRACE, which has created technology-based solution, including artificial intelligence for investigation of illicit financial flows. Welcome, Umut. And Professor Mihaly Fazekas is a full professor at the Central European University, Department of Public Policy, with focus on using big data methods to understand the quality of government globally. He is also the founder of scientific director of the innovative think tank and the Government Transparency Institute. He led a team of FCDO UK, GTI, and IMF, which won the first prize at the IMF Anti-Corruption Challenge for measuring corruption and its cost globally. Welcome, Mihaly. So let us start quickly. We are today focusing on the potential, how AI is potentially reshaping or likely to reshape the fight against corruption through its predictive analytics, real-time anomaly detection, AI-driven forensic tools, and many things which are coming. Our expert panel will explore these technologies and enhance how to enhance prevention, detection, and investigation of corruption, both domestically and globally. Particular focus will be on responsible AI, and we will be in the debate, the regulation versus innovation, which is very interesting at this point of time. Incidentally, last week we had a very good publication from OECD, the Governing with Artificial Intelligence, the State of Play, and Way Forward in Core Government Function. So it's very apt time, and this is, of course, it's for governance, but anti-corruption is part of the governance process. So with these, let's see how AI can uphold integrity, accountability, fairness, transparency, and what are the downside of it. So with this, I will start the discussion, but little bit, there are some people are still not sure what AI is. So I will give a very broad idea about AI, and of course, what I'm saying doesn't cover everything. So essentially, AI is the machine is mimicking human intelligence to solve complex problems. And we use algorithm. And the question is, what is algorithm? So algorithm is a process of or set of rules that is followed in calculation or other problem solving operations. Essentially, algorithm is an infinite sequence of mathematically rigorous instructions. People write algorithm, they prepare algorithm, and then they put it on the software, and they develop the software, and then it runs. We call it AI if we are using the specific techniques, and there are many names for it, like machine learning, deep learning, decision tree forest, decision forest, neural network, large language model, which is really revolutionizing AI field. So all these things we are going to discuss. Just want to remind that we still have the questions. Those who are just joining, there is a quiz going on, 1 to 5 questions. We will have many more as we progress. Please join the quiz and we will have fun. It's more interactive webinar. So let's start. I will be covering mainly AI and large language model in fight against corruption. So first question, Mihaly, to you. What artificial intelligence broadly refers to, and how large language models like GPT, Cloud, Perplexity, how they are shaping the generative AI models, and then of course linked to anti-corruption.
Great. Thanks a lot, Pavan, for this introduction and for the question. And welcome, everyone, also from myself. I hope you see me, hear me well. Now, of course, this is a question we cannot answer super easily in 2 or 3 minutes. But let me give you a few key definitions, which I think we can use in the discussion going forward and we can refer to. So artificial intelligence or AI models have developed from a broader class of machine learning models. And machine learning models have been around for a long time. Wide use in the anti-corruption space has started at the very least 10, 15 years ago. Now, what Pavan mentioned, there are different algorithms used in these models, and there are also, which is very important, also different types of data sets used. So the kind of, if you like, in early days, a lot of these models used structured data, numbers. So data which is already very well structured and ready for machine use and analysis. And they have been trained for very specific purposes, and they've been very successful. The machine learning algorithms of different type evolved, but their success has been driven by very careful crafting to the tasks at hand. So risk prediction models have been around for a very long time. Also in natural sciences, you might have heard about AlphaFold, which predicts the shape of proteins. These have been revolutionary in their fields, but all of these have been characterized by high degrees of specialization. Okay, so you train something for predicting protein structure, you cannot use it for corruption risk assessment or tax prediction. What is also common, and it's not the only approach, but common in these models, is that they infer logic, if you like, rules, more precisely, relationships between variables from examples. Okay, so machine learning models are different from classic statistical, like regression methods you might have heard about, in a sense that they are very flexible. They maximize, and as we're talking about supervised machine learning, it maximizes prediction accuracy. They try to infer the rules with given a certain set of inputs, say features of a contract, features of an invoice, features of a person, and then make a prediction how risky that person is. Corruption risk, collusion risk, fraud risk, you can have specific risk. But basically the idea is that you have a set of examples, known cases. Okay, this person is sentenced for corruption, this person is not. They have a certain set of features, their age, their gender, their financial assets, so on and so forth. And the machine infers the relationship between these features, these variables, and make a prediction to a target variable, which could be, for example, the degree of or likelihood of fraud taking place. So this is sort of well established in the anti-corruption space. Under the hood, when we prepare data sets, we want to, for example, deduplicate entities, recognize companies which trade under different names, but they're de facto the same. So very mundane tasks, but very important for making sense of data. They're well established for risk prediction, specifically trained for risk prediction. Now, what is very important, I will get back to this later on, what are the limitations of machine learning and artificial intelligence? They learn from examples. The quality of the examples will determine the quality of these models. Now, Pavan mentioned AI, mentioned ChatGPT, which is a particular form of LLM, large language model. So what is new about LLMs? So LLMs are trained on text. Whatever there is on Wikipedia, whatever is published in literary books, academic publications, you name it. Okay, so these models are not run on structured data, like already given numbers, like the chemical composition of a protein or the financial records of a firm. They are trained on enormous volumes of text. Okay, so these are NLP, natural language processing kind of models. And the trick under the kind of very recent about 7 years old innovation in this field is that there's a particular way of transforming text into mathematical representations, what we call transformers. So we have a set of vectors which represent words. And what is very important for you to understand is that how humans think about text is that we have a meaning for a word, but the context defines what we actually understand by a word. And this was a major challenge, this context embedding, and these are actually called embeddings in this literature, the embedding of words in their context, in their immediate environment in the text. This was something which was very hard for machines to learn. And the major innovation, as I said, very recent, 2017, was to introduce a particular class of transformers representing text as vectors, as numbers, with allowing these relations between a set of words. Okay, I will not go into the details of this, but basically under the hood, these models represent text as numbers, as vectors, and make predictions on which set of words, say a question, is likely to be followed by another set of words, an answer. Okay, or the first part of a joke and a second part of the joke. Again, these are predictive models which are run on these vectorized text, And they use a very powerful class of models, which are called deep learning. And deep learning, as Pavan said, very loosely, I want to emphasize this, very loosely mimic how neurons are related to each other in the human brain. And they are called networks because they have a set of features represented as nodes, and there are different relationships and weights representing the strength of these relationships between them. And as certain nodes are activated, certain features have an impact on an output prediction. Okay, so if one word is used in combination with another, they together give you a likelihood of a next word to be used. Okay, so this is very, very basic optimization models. Okay, so it's amazing that they produce what they do, but it's very important for us to understand that these models are a class of supervised machine learning models which are trained to guess what's the next word, next set of words. This generative AI. They generate text, video and images as well, but predominantly text, knowing a set of words, the kind of question you ask, and then making a prediction what would be the likely answer. So I try to make not too technical, but it's very important to understand what's under the hood because they're very different from what humans think. Okay.
Thank you so much. It was just to set the tone because people should understand how it works and what is generative AI and based on large language models. So thank you so much, Mihaly. And then let's go to very specific, from here, how are the government agencies and the financial institutions using these technologies to enhance transparency and how? And especially, as we have just a recent publication I mentioned from the OECD, it's and when I'm talking of transparency, very closely linked to corruption. So how you see it, Umud? Its floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Pavan. So the answer to that is yes, both public and private authorities are using AI in their service delivery or for compliance reasons. Obviously, for public services or public authorities, it's for governance, service delivery, and of course, law enforcement. Whereas financial institutions use it, for example, for optimization of their service, product, resilience, risk aversion, and compliance. Of course, we will look at this in the context of anti-corruption. In the UK, at least, the financial organizations have a legal duty to prevent, detect, and report corruption, fraud, and money laundering activities. So they have been actually employing AI much longer than the public services. Examples in terms of you ask me how, let's give a few examples how public authorities may be using it or the government agencies may be using it. For example, Estonia and Switzerland have implemented a blockchain-based ID system, digital ID system. This enables every single citizen to access public services, also vote in elections. And this helps in turn, to ensure transparency, accountability, but also deciding prioritization of different public services and investment in those services. If you look at it in the context of countering corruption, I won't give in this instance a name of a country which is using such a tool, but let's imagine for the purpose of this session is that AI, for example, can be used in public procurement fraud detection by government authorities. So a government agency wants to detect signs of corruption or suspicious activity in public contract awards, such as, I don't know, favoritism or bid rigging or inflated pricing. So they can use a variety of AI tools in dealing with such malfeasant activity or detecting such malfeasant activity. As earlier mentioned, you can use natural language processing to analyze contract documents, emails, and communications. You can use AI tools to detect anomalies, like to flag unusual patterns in bidding, pricing, or vendor selection. And also you can conduct the network analysis to uncover hidden relationships between officials and contractors and companies and people. And also, you can use AI to have some sort of prediction to assess risk scores for contracts or vendor-based activity and based on historical data. So these are some of the examples how AI can be used. How it works is, of course, the authorities will have to not just have the technology, but trustworthy information or data. So they need to gather the procurement records, vendor profiles, contract details, and communication logs. And if you conduct a pattern recognition in all this data cluster or in this, let's call it information pollution, because initially it doesn't look like anything. So you need to analyze it. So pattern recognition can identify red flags. Again, this is something that the banks do. You may get actually a text message, if you're spending or using your credit card in a country that you haven't been before, that's a flag often in the system that this is not part of your general behavior. So a similar approach can be used in public procurement integrity initiatives by AI. So for example, pattern recognition, if a particular vendor company has gained repeatedly an award from the same public authority, that could be identified. Or contracts that are awarded just below the thresholds that require an oversight, can be identified by pattern recognition. Or bids submitted within minutes from each other, between vendors or with consortium of vendors that can suggest collusion. So all these different things can be used. What AI does is it doesn't necessarily solve all the problems, but it allows us to detect any suspicious activity or actual activity early on. It can reduce manual workload. Again, this is perhaps for another session, but since the introduction of AI tools in the banking sector, at least we have the data where we had 6,200 plus branches, physical branches, bank branches being closed in the UK. So it can have an impact on other aspects. So we need to be careful and responsible using AI. And yes, it does increase transparency and accountability or auditability because you have a digital footprint, a trail of things that are being looked at. However, it goes back to, again, this question I raise once every time I'm asked to speak about AI is the data quality or trustworthy data and access to data, and not just looking at the legal aspects, but ethical concerns as well. So I'll stop there. I don't know how long I talked because I haven't rehearsed this, but if I have more time, I can elaborate more, but I'll stop there for now.
Yes. Yeah, we can talk more on the next round of discussion. So I will give floor to Mikhail, mainly, to focus on the public sector, private sector, AI tools, what are the differences, for the purposes of financial integrity and combating bribery and corruption. So what are the key differences? Because Umut also mentioned that, of course, it's being used in both sectors. Of course, it's a big topic, but Mikhail.
Well, I'll actually pick up on something Holly mentioned, is that this has been used, these type of tools have been used in certainly anti-money laundering, so AML, sanctions, transaction monitoring for decades, right? Risk assessments, anomaly detection, detecting patterns indicative of laundering and various potential financial frauds. We think self-dealing, misappropriation, now blockchain analysis for by FIs and other private sector actors, including those who even just specialize in tracking transactions through blockchain, automated reporting to regulators. But something that Umut started to touch on, and I realize we're all time limited here, but within corporate systems and private sector, again, fraud broadly defined. Corporate sector has been using closed loop systems to pattern detect fraud, red flags for many years now. It's when we get into predictive. It's not post hoc review. It's predictive, where ethical and legal concerns have to be addressed. Everything within a corporate environment, are transactions automatically stopped if it's predicted as suspicious. You all know it from your mobile device in the bank saying, sorry, we've just blocked your payment to that taxi you were trying to pay because we've never seen it before. But in a larger scale, you have to think about what are the repercussions if a payment is stopped, say, to a supplier because it looks suspicious. And it's not just limited to examining corporate books and records. It's when we leave that and we start, and you've got a human either in or on the loop, but when we get into reading employee communications, maybe just employees identified in positions most likely to engage in bribery, right, or collusion, cartel behavior, or are we scanning all employee communications? Then we've crossed into workplace surveillance, worker rights, privacy. That becomes sort of a serious question about what it means for private sector, and how that squares using these tools with current regulatory frameworks. So thinking about GDPR, employee rights here. It's one thing for a private sector corporation to say, well, statistically, our system is 80% accurate. But if 20% of that inaccuracy results in false accusations, unfair dismissals, reputational damage, and so on, right? There's a big problem if 1/5 of the time it's wrong. So results have to be more than just reproducible. Is it effective as a system, as opposed to being consistently right? E.g., how close are the results to an accepted true value? And it raises a lot of interesting questions for corporations, like, is there reproducibility, traceability? Is that their top priority at the expense of higher rate of false positives? But too many false positives and you'll get corporate executives or the compliance legal teams saying, AI is a waste of time. Why have we spent so much money and effort to get this up and running when all it does is, spit back low value garbage at us? And when we move to the public sector, then we start thinking about, well, the risks are going even higher. And we have to get past all the very well documented skills gaps, lack of capability by governments. No government that I'm aware of is offering 7-figure salaries like OpenAI or Meta. So AI scientists are a little short in supply on the government side. There are other obstacles to overcome, and Umit and Mahaly both touched on this very briefly. Quality of data that can be drawn from to train. Legislation hasn't kept pace. Standards are still being drafted. Principles like accountability, fairness, ethics, transparency, they've yet to be fully defined within each country, but also within specific use cases. So when we start looking at government-led or proactive, predictive systems seeking to identify, thwart potentially fraudulent, corrupt transactions, used as a look-back tool, or to say review procurement records, land transfer actions, and flag these. Do they warrant further investigation? Again, if we're going into the look-back territory, the risk is a little bit lower, but again, we need quality data. If it's predictive, again, we start to veer into what we consider the minority report territory, where due process may be eroded, or only certain demographics are targeted unfairly. And we'll touch on that probably a little bit later in the discussion. But past cases, existing legal norms, can be a basis for classifying certain acts as suspicious, and Mihaly touched on this. And it may mean that the algorithms are reproducing prevailing bias, and that is frequently found in older government data sources. Some of the very early models, we're talking decades ago, were trained on US Army data that has been very clearly identified as deeply biased, and some of that literally still has, it's like the ghost in the machine. Many years on, there's still a whiff of that in there from those early data sets. So the limits, it limits the scope of the initiatives. It makes it a little more difficult. Um, but we also have to think government serving all people, not a narrow, constituency. The stakeholders are not just shareholders and employees and vendors, suppliers, but rather everyone. So we have to start with what is the end goal of that system? What are the benefits? What are the potential harms? Where is that training data coming from? Who's building it? Who has say in its design if it's government led? What protections and controls are going to be put in place? Who will monitor this? Who's going to independently test it or audit these systems? How are citizens going to be reassured that the use of AI isn't for malintent, such as one party using it to help keep itself in power by intentionally abusing algorithms to, say, sway public opinion or change predictive outcomes? And we look at typically systems for anti-corruption, financial integrity, right? We think of the red flag system, only looking for corrupt arrangements, but as we all well know, from decades of involving and combating this, criminals are more agile than even Silicon Valley. They can easily substitute tools or vehicles facilitating corruption, and so dynamic changes, right? This approach means they can be limiters for governments. Governments are slow movers for the most part. Building systems takes time. It risks obsolescence by the time it's deployed. So because of all of these factors, the lack of actionable frameworks, they've only got guidance or guardrails generally in place, but no active legislation. Most governments have not mapped their existing legislative and regulatory landscapes against proposed AI use. So, where do existing laws and regulations fit with the proposed use? Where are the gaps that are going to require drafting new legislation? Can we borrow from existing international standards? Can those be adopted? Or are we looking at really, a multi-year, even treaty drafting to gain consensus? As we all know, financial integrity is borderless. You can't have it in just one country and not have another country involved, or all countries when we get right down to it. So all of that has to be answered in order for citizens to have trust in any system deployed by government, be it at the state level, municipal, even just a local agency. So it can be far more challenging than the private sector, that can jettison a vendor system and go purchase another one, or tailor as needed.
Thank you so much. You have covered so many aspects, and of course, I still have the question a little bit all around the ecosystem of a successful AI tool, because ultimately writing a software or having a tool is not enough. We need to have kind of a will to implement it, or as you mentioned, maybe we have some, I call it data psychology, people, even an organization, whether it's a private sector or public sector. The greatest problem which earlier, I'm going back to you, Mikhail, is that the data quality, AI can also be used to improve the data quality, because we had unstructured data, we had the websites where governments mostly put the PDF data, and people could not interoperate. So and at least AI is something which converts into supervision based, if it is trained into a structured and clean data, and then it can be further used by another AI. As Mihaly said, yes, it's a task based. Every AI is not, one AI cannot do everything. We don't have a general AI. So we still have the weak AI, which is task oriented. But again, the question is to any one of the panelists is, because I will just put to one panelist and we'll move to another very important part, is how far, what type of ecosystem is actually necessary for these tools to be successful? Building capacity, for example, in public or private sector. Public sector specific, private sector is still on curve, but in public sector.
Maybe I shoot around a couple of ideas and then I
Yes.
leave it to the other panelists. So a lot of things have been said, so I would just highlight and connect them in a different way as a response. So data is foundation, right? So this is obvious, but in what ways? That's the question. So the first thing, people should understand there are two big branches of machine learning of AI. One is supervised and one is unsupervised. Some of my colleagues in the panel mentioned anomaly detection. This is typically an unsupervised. You just throw a lot of data in an algorithm and it finds what's odd, out of ordinary. Now, this makes a lot of sense if you know that corruption and fraud is the exception, not the norm. Now, procurement has been mentioned, a couple of country names have been thrown around. I would be worried that in some context, corruption is the norm. Corruption is how government is run, right? So anomaly detection actually would not work. In credit card fraud, which is one of the successful examples of anomaly detection, that works because, most credit card transactions are totally legit, and a few outliers, very odd, numbers and timing and, so on and so forth, they are fraudulent, right? So still there is a risk that what is outlier, what is odd, is not corrupt, it's just unusual, maybe incompetence, maybe some data fluke, right? So for anomaly detection, we also need very high quality data, right? So I think that's why I usually don't advise governments to use any anomaly detection methods in this space, because it's just too unreliable, knowing the state of administrative data. I'm not saying never, I'm saying this is not really the most successful tools we have. Now, the supervised method and the predictions have been said. So we talk about predictions when we have examples to learn from. And unfortunately, in the corruption, fraud, and I think collusion has been mentioned, or cartels. So in this domain, the difficulty is that often we have positive cases, proven cartel, proven corrupt cases. Now, these positive kind of labeled cases, they are sometimes, or in some countries, typically are not objective, in a sense that corruption and corruption investigations are used in a lot of countries as a pretext for simply fighting opposition, right? Or oligarchic groups fighting against each other. So you get a set of cases in your data which is totally biased, right? It's about political conflict rather than genuine corruption. So you have to be very careful with your positive cases, and you have to be certain that what you make the model learn is trustworthy. You really learn corruption rather than political conflict. But that's just talking about the positive cases. There is, for a model, you need to learn about the negative versus positive, the differences. So you need clean cases. And that's much harder in our space. We usually have unlabeled, uninvestigated cases, and a lot of models assume they have not been found to be corrupt, so they are non-corrupt. But they haven't been investigated. So may as well be corrupt. That goes back to my point, whether the system where you try to come up with an AI tool is genuinely more on the corrupt end or more on the clean end, where corruption is the exception. So basically, the existence of a reliable set of positive and negative cases, the representativeness of these cases to the underlying bad behaviors is a challenge here. And here I would refer back to one of the earlier panelists who said corrupt groups are very innovative. They are. What does it mean for our learning models? We have to retrain them on newer examples, and they have to unlearn older examples because no one is doing corruption in a way, I don't know, 15 years ago we have been doing it, right? So these sorts of problems are not insurmountable, but it means that your model has to be crafted. Your model has to be trained in a careful way. And this is the investigative use, right? Anomaly detection for the credit card fraud, also the risk flagging. This is about AI or machine learning supporting investigations. We haven't talked about the preventive function, which is policy uses. Here I see a lot more the traditional policy analysis where we need to understand what drives risks, what policies, in a classic impact evaluation sense, have an impact, have a potential impact. AI helps a lot in the back. There are AI-supported impact evaluation methods, but still the key thing is we need to understand which policies work, how to get them through, which are feasible. So the art of policy analysis and policy making remains as important as before. I stop here and I pass on the word to the other panelists because I'm sure they have a lot of additions to make.
Well, yeah, just picking it. Well, I was picking up on, you mentioned the credit cards, and that's because it's very, I wouldn't say simple, but there's a lot of historical data on any one person and their credit card use. So it's easy to build that profile. We know that they always go to the same shops and they always get their coffee roughly on Tuesday mornings at Starbucks, or, they always shop at Marks and Spencer. Like you see, it's an easy pattern detection, so that anomaly stands out. But I think you're absolutely spot on, Mihaly, about the policy uses that AI can offer with respect to a better understanding of corruption landscape, what's effective. Italy did a very interesting study looking at just surveying its various regions to try to identify, using AI, to identify where procurement in contracts, government contracts, was highest. And they weren't trying to do it as an enforcement tool, but rather to understand why were there differences? Why was it higher in some regions than others? And what the tool was able to help them identify was that those regions that had more standardized contracting, RFP processes, tender processes where it was standardized, had lower risks of corruption. And this was not something, given the volume of data, that a human could have easily analyzed and drawn this conclusion, but using this AI tool, doing a look back and looking across the different regions and comparing them, they were able to identify, if those with the regions with the highest corruption in this particular tendering for contracts, if we standardize, then we see the numbers go lower because we've already seen the results in those that have that standardization.
So thank you so much. Many things have come up from this discussion, and we again go back to the trust factor. And you can see on the screen, we have put this question, would you trust AI system to make decisions in sensitive areas like corruption investigation? Very particular, very specific, and you can see the responses. Any comments, very quick one, 30 seconds from each panelist, how, or maybe 1 minute, how you see the trust factor. Yes, Umut, starting with you.
Okay, so depends how you want to use the AI. So as someone who's involved developing an AI tool for investigating illicit money flows, the principle was very simple for us, really. We don't allow the AI to make a decision. So it's a tool like a calculator to help us to arrive at a decision. So the meaningful human control is always there. So that's how we want to use it. And that's the responsible way of going about it. So if you do it that way, you're not really changing the status quo in that respect. So yeah, that's really important. The other thing I want to quickly say is, we need to really look at each question in context. because some contexts are not as riskful. So if you are using an AI tool that has implications for someone's liberty or their right to property, obviously the bar is raised. So you need much more safeguards and checks and balances and accuracy, because what is at stake is very important. And also, we don't need new laws. I'm also, Pawan, trying to answer some of the questions posted under the question.
Yes.
What if we don't have laws and things like that? So we don't always need a new law to govern something new. So the example is, I'm putting it into the chat box, a very recent case raised by a Polish court to the Court of Justice of the European Union for a preliminary reference, asking whether a national court composed of a judge appointed through an AI-driven random assignment system. So the AI randomly selects a judge to be appointed to a particular case. And the question was asked whether this would be considered as an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. And the question refers to actually not an AI regulation or law, it refers to Article 20 and 47 of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. So we need to look at the use of AI in terms of compliance, accountability, not just AI law, but many other fundamental principles we've been very accustomed to for many years. So anyway, I'll stop there because that was more than 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can pick up one of the things you said and also react on this chart. So I think trusting AI to make decisions is the question is what kind of decision, what is the context, how contested that decision is, right? So if it's randomly pulling names from a pool, a basket, like a judge name, and then putting it, that's relatively uncontroversial, right? We just need to generate random numbers, and a lot of countries
it can be
use
controversial
random selection, right? Sorry?
But it could involve the government, so they are manipulating which judge sits in the case. So it is not that simple.
No, it's very simple. If you random selection, it's a random number generation. A lot of countries use random audits, and machines tell us which random numbers are picked. I think it's uncontroversial. And we have been using this in a lot of countries, have randomness as a principle, and machines implement that, not people generating random numbers. Also, do we trust AI to make decisions whether two writings of the same company name are the same, IBM or I.B.M? Yeah, sure, uncontroversial. And a lot of practical uses in our decision making, in the kind of underlying processes are like this. And I think these are already outsourced to machines and various algorithms, AI or not AI. And I think these are accepted. Not all of them are uncontroversial, actually, but they are accepted. I think the more difficult ones, when we need human judgment, this is where I think the questions really arise, for which I have no answers. There is an appeal, and then I see the Albania's AI agent, or minister, if you like, has been raised here. So the question is, do we trust the machine to make unbiased and fair decisions? Or we rather trust people who have been elected or selected certain process? And I think the judgment is out there. Of course, if you don't trust people, then try your luck with a machine. But machines have their biases. I try to say that. And if you train an AI on Albanian procurement data, I don't know the rate of corruption in Albanian public procurement, but it's non-zero. That AI will learn corruption, right? So based on the learning or the training data, your AI will be corrupt or not, right? So this is not like AI is non-corrupt by default. It's about how it's trained, how it's used, the kind of interaction we have with it, which defines if it becomes some sort of fair and unbiased interlocutor or decision maker versus is just yet another tool to do corruption.
Thank you. I think we will move forward. Mikhail, I'll pass it on to the next, because we have more questions to come. And of course, the trust is a major factor, which we are going to discuss also in context of the next question of mine, is about the regulations, actually. And also about algorithmic explainability of AI. So the question I will first throw to Mikhail, guidelines which should be issued for responsibly integrating AI and machine learning and other innovations. I mean, I'm coming to the innovation versus regulation debate. So quick one, because we are, a bit behind time. So quick, say maybe 2 to 3 minutes.
A quick one on regulation.
Yes.
I mean, listen, on guidance alone, there are over 700 AI ethics principles published by groups, ranging from the Catholic Church to Microsoft. Not to mention governments. I mean, I think I've surveyed I don't know, 70 plus national strategies and guidance documents from governments, and the majority of them call for accountability, right? Call for various transparency, ethics, explainability. We tend to think of the EU AI Act, and certainly for AI systems, right? High risk categories, GPI. There are accountability requirements. I do think that there's an interesting there's interesting case law that's been developing actually for well over a decade now. That's now we're seeing the results of that with AI. So long before the AI Act, for instance, Italy's digital administrative code, right, provided a basis for an early decision back in 2017, where it actually pointed to it was asked whether the court was asked whether the right of access to an algorithm fell under existing law, and it pointed back to this administrative code, this digital administrative code, and a 1993 law that contain norms of automated information system used by public agencies. And then the court linked AI directly with that existing 1993 law and said, yeah, listen, all citizens are guaranteed rights of access and redress with respect to these systems, mandating transparency. And we see that in other countries as well. Now we have the AI Act, but China has the interim administrative measure for generative AI services. They have required accountability for certain outputs. Complaint mitigation processes have to be put in place. South Korea's very recent AI Basic Framework Act. It's a national law that just went into effect a few months ago. It's being phased in, but it has obligations for risk management, human oversight, impact assessments for high-risk systems. Uzbekistan even has a law right now. Again, brand new, but creates administrative fines for unlawful processing. It's a binding regime, and it limits how AI only decisions affect rights. We see lots of similar mandates at municipal levels across the US, both state and municipal. New York City's local law 144 is quite well known now, but dozens of other cities and municipalities have instituted similar requirements. And there's case law evolving as well. There was an important case in Texas a few years back. It was a teachers union that sued the school district because it had used AI to determine whether these teachers were given certain benefits in terms of their teaching, whether they were rewarded or deemed subpar teachers. They won. If you think about the Rite Aid case in the US, Rite Aid was using AI, including facial rec, for crime prevention, fraud detection. It was erroneously identifying, shoppers as being criminals, high risk for engaging in fraud. Banning them from stores. There was police enforcement action, and again, Rite Aid lost. The courts determined, look, there must be robust accountability. There's got to be regular testing for accuracy. So I mean, the list goes on, but I think that sort of sets the stage for when we think about existing regulations and how they apply to now these new uses.
Thank you so much. And we already had this Mentimeter question, and I can see a lot of people who have responded. And of course, the highest level I can see people are worried more about is transparency, privacy, bias, accountability. I think we are talking of all the things which is, I'm glad that we have very aware participants who are aware how AI is working and what are the concerns. So thank you all participants for participating and giving your views. Yes, Mihaly, please go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to raise an important point, which is, I think it's very important for this folder group. So we talk about AI as if this was somehow given, but it's not decided what kind of AIs models we have as citizens, as companies, as governments. So I would like to highlight one important thing is about control over what these models learn, what these models do. And I think simply asking a public policy question from OpenAI's ChatGPT is kind of, you give up your control, right? So when governments think about doing their own AI or big organizations in the private sector, and an important question is whether they have their local AI on their local machine trained with their own data, and then privacy is in their hands, right? The parametrization of the model is in their hand, right? What kind of input goes in there, what weights those inputs have in the decision making. So I think this is very important, and we shouldn't just assume that because ChatGPT is so cool, we should all use ChatGPT, right? There are these other dimensions which are decision-making points for governments and for us as citizens. Transparency, privacy, bias, accountability of these models are all dependent on whether we have our own models, we train them or not, right? And then the cost of this is going down dramatically. You don't need $100 million to train your own AI. So really, you can have something in which you are in control of. And I think this is something governments should very seriously consider, and not just for legal purposes, but for accountability to voters, right? Because if they delegate some decisions to an AI, the very least, they should be in control of that AI, not give up control.
True, but look at the Syrie case in the Netherlands, right? The Dutch government. For those of you unfamiliar with it, the Dutch government back in 2014 it took a variety of government databases, combined it, called it Syrie, System for Risk Indication. It was a big data effort to supposedly end unlikely citizen profiles, that is, anomalies, fraud against government for benefits, etc. And many of the experts with the Dutch government said, don't do it. This is not well thought out. But they proceeded with it. Any government agency that suspected fraud with benefits, allowances, taxes, etc., even down to profiling specific neighborhoods, could make use of Syrie. And they did, and hundreds of citizens were wrongly identified. The system wrongly accused minorities in particular of being involved, complicit in fraud, and many citizens were denied their benefits by the Syrie system, or erroneously accused of crimes. Ultimately, they sued. And under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and several other human rights treaties, the court actually did find in favor, and it observed it was the lack of transparency, that the right to respect for private life, that a data subject shouldn't, has a reasonable expectation not to have all their personal data tracked. The system was insufficiently transparent. verification was absent. It wasn't proportional or in relation to the aims of what the system was meant to do. Long litany of other issues, including discrimination, lower socioeconomic status, in particular being one of the biases that were identified. And we've seen a similar case in Australia. They were using a manual system. They transformed it into an AI to be used with welfare recipients to, again, identify fraud. It was intended to save taxpayer dollars. And instead, when they converted it to this system away from the manual, it was a 50-fold increase that the automated system produced, which is great, right? Dramatic increase in efficiencies. Only its false positive rate also soared. 470,000 plus people wrongly accused of fraud. Again, eventually class action, the state loses, a huge cost to the taxpayers for that. I'm not saying it doesn't have its advantages, but I think it's important to recognize that when the state builds something like this, you have to be very careful with what you're building and have adequate protections around it. The last thing I want to mention is China's system called Zero Trust, and I'm not making that up. So it's a rather unusual example because they take AI to sift massive volumes of data. They built their own system, the Chinese government did. It's 150 plus databases that it draws from. Everything. It even reads satellite imagery. Right, looks at car sales, friends and family members of officials, property records, financial transactions, construction records, and it was so good they stopped using it. Why? Because it was a little too good. It was very efficient at flagging suspicious activities by officials. Now, the official line was that, Zero Trust lacks explainability as to how it's arriving at its conclusions. But it's also largely understood that its conclusions were essentially accurate most of the time. It was just making the officials awfully nervous. There was concern that those higher in power were able to abuse the system to advance their own political agendas, because once they had information about somebody, say a rival, they could use it against them to point to that person being corrupt and move them out of the way. And it was also making politicians look bad. So no one trusts Zero Trust anymore.
Thank you very much.
Just a reaction on this. So I think we are talking about the same thing, that governments need to be in control. It's not a guarantee against failure. And then you quoted two examples, and I'm pretty sure they are well thought through. But there are a lot of other success stories which don't go to court because they're successful. And the fundamental thing is that governments can exactly say, the first version of this model, the pilot version, learned from this data, and look, it's discriminating, it's using this information, that which you shouldn't, you can remove it. You have the control over it, right? And this is very difficult. You need technical skills. And then we get to the how many 6-digit salaries of data scientists. But if you have the right people, you are in control. And that's what what citizens want. I don't want a government which just says, let's use some sort of model trained in whichever way, we have no idea, and then we just use it blindly, because that's a recipe for lack of accountability.
SEC's been really, US SEC, sorry, has been really successful with some of their AI that's reading corporate financial reports, looking at trading patterns, sifting data, identifying potential corporate misconduct. They even use it to monitor compliance by companies, how well the compliance programs are working, up until the recent lack of enforcement on FCPA. But it was looking at that, and it's been highly successful. That's an example of a very well-designed system.
eventually, I think the technology, the AI is helpful, and we are learning from a lot of mistakes, or what has happened in the past, what type of data causing biases. Plus, explainability is still a question mark, because the black box problem still continues with many AI tools, but they are being solved. The technologists are solving those things. As Mihaly mentioned, control over data, yes. The new thing is coming up, agentic AI, the orchestration of agentic AI, where enterprise data will be on smaller, short, what we call small language model, SLM, which is the next one. And I just read a few days back that it could be so useful, low energy, that it can be run on mobile phones. So things are changing. The problem of LLM is that we need how many gigabytes of energy, and it's being, even these big companies are establishing nuclear power plants to support their data centers. So, I mean, many things are coming up, but we have only 75 minutes webinar, so we have few minutes. And I can see that there are several questions while I read them, because I can see most of the questions have been answered. Thank you, Stephanie, because I was about to ask you to put question number 8. So who should be ultimately responsible when AI tool makes a wrong decision? I think that is one of the questions, so I will not read that. Another question was balancing AI positives and the negative side in the public agencies. Then there was a question on hallucinations, particularly the quality of data, the quantified data, particularly in procurement, how AI system shows a promise in tracking. I think we have already answered this. Then there's concern of accountability and who makes the decision. So that is already here. Let's see how everybody answers. And are laws and legal framework acknowledging and even regulating use of AI in the prevention and detection of corruption? So do we have such laws? I mean, we already discussed different countries, the AI Act, which has EU Act, sorry, has been promulgated. Now, many countries are adopting. So let's see how people respond, and a quick response on this. And then we go to the last question, because unless there is more question to answer, we will just take the last question and then wrap it up. So let's see. So question is, yes. Stephanie, can you show me the answer of the previous question? Who should be responsible? A quick 2-3 words from panelists. What do you think? I mean, not 2-3 words, quick ones. Who should be responsible if AI does any mistake? And we are very specific, talking about a corruption case, for example, very sensitive. Umut.
Okay, I think everyone should be responsible. So, you can't pass the culpability or responsibility of a single person. Of course, if it's a public authority, then we approach it. But again, we need to look at this in context. So there's an element of responsible creation, development of the AI, the innovation, and then there's the use. What we haven't covered is important. This will be published in a book that's coming out that I'm involved in, and we've done some empirical research on the trust or responsibility of the users of AI tools. So if you have poor user experience, or you don't trust the AI system, which we forget about just because it's available, that it will be used. So it's a complex question, and it requires a complex answer. So what I'm trying to say is it depends. If there is a specific regulation that's requiring that you do certain checks and balances and safeguards and explain your AI, blah, 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 then of course you can invoke that provision against the developer or the user. But if there is no law, as I tried to give an example, is that we have many other laws requiring us to act in a certain way. So we can use those principles, you know, right to liberty or right to fair trial. You know, so any information that's created by a law enforcement agency or the prosecutor has to be given to the defendant and his or her lawyers. So you know what I mean? So we have an ample opportunity to defend ourselves, to, you know, refute the case put against us. So yeah, we have many other rules that can be applied, but I don't have a straightforward answer or who's going to be responsible. It all depends on the context and what is at stake. So, you know, you can claim non-discrimination principle if you think because of your gender or your political opinion or your race, skin color, you've been discriminated by a bank or a government agency. That's a separate law to invoke, which you don't need a particular AI Act to raise that issue. So to you, Mikhail.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, the AI Act is really a consumer product safety law. That's really the bottom line. That's what it is. But if you get into assigning liability, I mean, I think again with like so many anything, but if you think of like the healthcare analogy or transportation analogy, you know, how many steps were taken? Was there an ethical risk committee that evaluated it? You know, were you using an XAI framework? Was it regularly audited and tested? You know, how much was done to mitigate the risk? Did everybody take reasonable steps? Or, you know, was it just tossed out there, you know, which I don't think is really a likely scenario for an anti-corruption AI tool. But you know, to Umut's point, there's so many other laws that are applicable when you go to assign liability for something that goes wrong with it. And then it also, you know, what were the damages? You know, who was harmed? And was it avoidable? That's really what it comes down to. Or was it just a risk?
And just to quickly mention to those, since we are based in the European Union and is hosted by IACA, it's worth mentioning, albeit we have a specific legal instrument dealing with AI, which is the EU AI Act. You know, the instrument specifically says that the EU Act does not replace other legal principles. It complements. It's supposed to be read in light of other fundamental principles and rights that have already existed in the European Union's legal structure. So that's worth remembering.
Thank you so much. We are actually running out of time. Stephanie, can you run all the questions one after another for giving a pause so that people can answer them? And in the meanwhile, I will let me see if I have any Q&A, because we will be answering not from the chat, but only from Q&A. Anybody who wants to put their questions, please put it in the Q&A. And
I put a couple of slides in there to answer
I can see, yes,
about ethics and things like that.
Exactly. So. I can see that. Thank you so much for that. There is one question for Dr. Fazeka. Is based on your experience in public procurement, are there any specific tasks or phases of procurement process that you find easier or more relevant to automate with AI? Quick one.
I did answer it in writing. Is it not visible for you?
No. Okay. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I can see now. Okay. Please. Thank you so much, because it saves time. Okay. So we have more questions coming up. Please,
there is a question under it. I think also it makes reference to procurement, but in particular brings in the AI hallucinations. And I think I want to pick this up because I think this has a relevance way beyond procurement. So what is hallucination, right? It's basically a false prediction, a false positive or false negative, right? This is what it is. And I think Mikhail mentioned a couple of examples. So each model will have some percentage of false positives and false negatives, right? And then the cost of the positives and negatives could be very different, right? The false negative is someone is corrupt, but the model predicts his or she is clean, right? That's one cost. The other thing is the opposite, which is also very damaging, is someone is not corrupt, but the machine predicts is corrupt, and there is a high cost of law enforcement. Say there is an audit, there is an investigation, so on and so forth. So I think what is very important for each of these models, going back to the kind of governments, elected officials being in control, is that how do you value the false positives and false negatives? What degree of error you accept, right? Because humans make errors. Maybe we can even measure what errors an average corruption investigator makes, and whether the machine makes less error, fewer errors, so different kinds of errors, and whether we can combine human and machine intelligence to get best of the both worlds, right? They have different blind spots. And I think when you ask the question whether who is liable when AI makes a decision, I'm a little bit scared of what you imply, that we allow autonomous decisions done by machines rather than human decisions augmented by AI recommendations, data processing, guidance, right? The sort of interaction that the ultimate decision maker is still the public official or the elected official, or you name it, the judge, right? And the AI is there to improve that decision. So I think I would prefer, and this is a choice, right? And it's my personal opinion, I would prefer to live in a world where humans are responsible for human action, where AI helps them, but we don't just outsource decisions, important decisions, which contestable decisions to machines, right? So this is, of course, again, as communities where we want to be in, 5, 10, 20 years. But I would very much prefer these explicit decisions on tolerable error, hallucinations, positive and negatives, and then deliberate documented efforts in minimizing those.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is a bit of kind of debatable thing. And I personally, again, I feel that it's still the people who are using, because we are still talking of AI as a tool and human in the loop. That's the concept, HITL. People, conceptually, people say that we have to be in the loop because ultimately trust factor, again, as you said, positive or negative, false positive, false negative. I mean, there are whole types of ratios, and all AIs are being tested on these different ratios. But ultimately, we cannot 100% till it is being developed. As it was mentioned that AI kind of thing tested 5 or 6 years back. There were so many stories about the biases and many things people learned and trying to improve it. I will close it here. I think it's such a subject that I think we can talk for another 2-3 hours, but we will not finish. So, but it was very, very interesting. Thank you for bringing your knowledge to the people who are here. I will very broadly, I will summarize. I mean, starting with the EU Act 2024, bringing this concept of regulating, but at the same time giving some leeway to the local acts and what the governments are doing. Detecting anomalies in financial transactions. These are the various things which AI is doing, bringing transparency. We have trace system which has been developed, which I could not ask the details, but it is something which was developed under EU project to track the illicit financial flows. Responsibility, we have already spoken. I believe that at least so far, I think the question is when we go to the court, of course, the context will be examined, but more or less those who are using it. And then we have the large language models actually is very good in summarizing the general text. So it's very, very powerful tool. And especially for if we have to do corruption proofing, which is, we did not speak here, is corruption proofing of an act or provisions or the procedures. Perhaps it's good to detect where the discretion is or what type of powers are given to the officials. So those things can be easily detected and brought back. And I think so next time I think this could be itself a subject. A strong institution, good governance, and trained professionals. It's extremely important for as a I would say to create an ecosystem to AI to succeed. Just AI itself. And there are different types of AI, so we also have to be, aware of it. We talked about the black box nature, algorithmic transparency. Again, that is one of the things. I think I saw a paper of OECD a couple of years back, which is something which is coming up very well because transparency is possible only when it is explainable, and that was a problem with AI. So I think this is again being solved. Many things was discussed, so I'm not touching everything at this point, but thank you so much. And I'm not sure, Stephanie, could you run all the questions, or
Yes.
do we still have all the questions? Okay, then thank you, everyone. And it was very fruitful discussion. Maybe we will have another session sometime in next 6 months, so that we catch up with something new which has come up or tested, explainability, many things. With this, I close the session, and thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you to
everyone.
my team, Stephanie.
Thank you, Pawan. Thank you, Stephanie.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, audience.
Bye-bye.
Would it be possible to please get a group picture just before we leave?
Okay.
Okay, I will just be 1 second. Okay. Thank you very much. Perfect.
Thanks.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Have a
everyone.
good day.
Nice day.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.